Welcome to FilmSEEN. I'm Zef, your host on this podcast by filmmakers and for cinema enthusiasts. Firstly, I'd like to give a shout out to Recording Radio Film Connection, a company that pairs film students to working professionals in the production industry. This podcast is sponsored by Alphabet City Films. Look out for our debut feature film, The Trouble, out now on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV. For more info about that, check out our website at troublefilm.com. So this is the pilot episode of FilmSEEN, a podcast where we discuss cinema and interview filmmakers to get a behind-the-scenes glimpse on the creative process of making movies, and where cinema enthusiasts such as ourselves go down the rabbit hole on our favorite movies and discuss scenes from our favorite films. So I'd like to introduce my guest today. We have quadruple threat Gregory Blake, who is a writer, director, actor, and producer. Gregg's someone who I've collaborated with on several projects, including Gregg's upcoming horror film, The Smiler, that we shot over the fall. And we're in the advanced stages of post-production with it at this point. Welcome, Gregg.
Thanks for having me, Zef. Quadruple threat.
And we have the very talented cinematographer, Alex Gray, who I've closely worked with over the last 6 years. Alex DP'd on The Trouble, as well as The Smiler, Gregg's short that he wrote and directed, and that I helped produce along with Christina Maldonado. Shout out to Christina. Aside from DPing, Alex is also an outstanding colorist, and he does color grading. So welcome, Alex.
It's good to be here, and congratulations on your new podcast.
Appreciate it, guys. So I figured for the first episode, I kind of talked to these guys ahead of time about talking about some of our favorite scenes of all time. It's January 2nd right now. We just started 2020, so some of the movies, we'll also be talking about some films that we liked in 2019. But I wanted to kind of jump in and talk about some of our favorite films from all time. Then we're going to talk about some movies that we really liked in 2019, as well as some films that came out last year that we'd like to see that maybe we haven't seen. And I want to introduce something called the bunker list at the end, so we'll hatch all that out.
Yeah,
nice.
Do you want to get started talking about your favorite films?
Sure. You know, a lot of jump in with both feet here, huh?
I think so.
All right, I like it.
So, Alex?
I guess I'll go with the Rear Window, Hitchcock film. I don't know if you guys have seen it. You probably
I've definitely
both.
seen
Rear
Window.
Probably seen it multiple
Great
times
film.
at this point. So the scene where the actor's name is Jimmy Stewart, right? That's Jimmy Stewart. And he is, so basically I don't know if this is spoilers are allowed or.
Just, I guess, give an indication if it's a spoiler. Spoiler alert.
So yeah, this is a spoiler alert.
We should have
you
a
need like
button
a
that's
sign.
like
This is
it's like
definitely-
a hotkey. It's like spoiler alert.
This is definitely going to be a spoiler. So basically, he spends the majority of the film looking out his window, observing people, not being able to interact with them because he is injured. His leg is injured. And he witnesses a murder through a window, but he can't prove it to anyone. Everyone he talks to, including he's a very social person. He's like a socialite, but everyone he runs this idea by that he witnessed a murder. They basically tell him he's crazy. He's nuts. He has too much time on his hands. He needs to focus on something else. But anyways, my favorite scene from that film, which I think is like just so good cinematography wise, and in like just directing and just is the confrontation where the person he's been accusing of the murder is in his apartment looking at Jimmy Stewart, and Jimmy Stewart's in the chair, and he has his leg, his leg is messed up. He can't move. He couldn't defend himself if he wanted to, but he gets confronted, and just the tension in the scene and the atmosphere in the scene. And they have his like, they really play with shadows in this scene. It's kind of like, it's just one of those moments, I think, when you think of a cinematic, just a very cinematic scene, it would be probably like one of the first things I would think of as in terms of composition, lighting, and just impact, and how the director like conveyed that. You can tell that the film was building specifically to that, I think, particular scene, and it's just so tense and so good, and the acting is just on point. So that'll be my favorite, one of my favorite top 3 scenes.
Excellent. For sure, in my top 3, and
probably my favorite scene in any movie of all time is in the movie True Romance with Christian
film.
Slater and Patricia Arquette, directed by the late Tony Scott. Actually, rest in peace to Tony Scott.
Rest in peace.
There's a scene where Dennis Hopper, the great Dennis Hopper, played Christian Slater's dad, and he lives in a trailer. He's like a security guard, and these gangsters show up to his door, and Christopher Walken is in the scene.
I know exactly what scene. Yeah.
And they're inquiring about where his son is, and the dad obviously catches wind of who these guys are and what they're looking to do with his son, and they sit him down. They're interrogating him. They're roughing him up, and basically Dennis Hopper goes into this monologue about how Sicilians basically aren't white, that the Moors conquered them. And I just love how it's completely offensive, but what I love about the scene is the subtext of it, that he's just trying to get under their skin so that they end up, spoiler alert, they end up killing Dennis Hopper so that he doesn't divulge the info about where his son is, And it's just beautifully acted, amazingly lit, just the compositions, and James Gandolfini, a younger James Gandolfini who played Tony Soprano, is in the background, and just the tension of the scene.
More James Gandolfini in my life, please.
Right.
There's not enough of that guy.
Absolutely. So another actor who's, died tragically young. And I just love that scene. I just think it's exquisite filmmaking.
It is. That's definitely one of the top moments in cinema history that I can think of as well. It's really good.
It's an excellent one.
Yeah.
Good choice. Should I go? Let's just keep going?
Yeah, I guess.
All
yeah,
right.
we'll kind of do the rounds. And
Okay.
there's not really any rules, whether you think it's the best scene ever in cinema history or something that impacted you greatly, or just
I feel like I would have to take weeks to really catalog a bunch of scenes. You know what I mean? These are some things that
takes
the fun out of it.
came into my mind. I was
that's kind of what it's about. It's just
about.
kind of a discussion of scenes that are just that you love or impactful, or you moved you in some sort of way, or stuck with you.
My favorite film of, I think it was 2015 was when this was released. Drive is the film. I'm a huge Ryan Gosling head. 2011? God damn, I'm old. Your producer just put up. I feel so old right now.
Shout out to our producer,
2011.
Jonathan DiFilippo.
Why did I think it was 2015?
Thank you, John.
That's weird. All right, well, whatever. 2011 was one of my favorite film that year, and I was really big into Ryan Gosling at the time. I still am. Let's be real. I just love
Great
everything.
actor.
I love everything the guy makes, and this was for me, I think, probably peak Gosling. Just like the perfect role for him in every way conceivable, and this probably was one of the films that sparked this thing that seems to follow him. People feel like criticizing him, so they come up with, well, he doesn't always have lines in movies or whatever, and sometimes he just looks at the camera. And I'm like, if the guy is that fucking talented that he can draw you in without a fucking line, that's something to admire, not something to criticize. But that's a whole other.
I completely agree.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm a great admirer of his, and that's one of the reasons I admire him. Is just he doesn't need to say a whole lot, and you still feel like you're experiencing what he's experiencing. And Drive is a perfect example of that. There was so much happening in that film without much being said. And the scene that I'm thinking of that really sort of exemplifies that is the Real Human Being scene, where the song Real Human Being is playing, and they're driving. It starts with this great line where they're in this car. There's clearly this romantic tension between the two of them. There's, he's spending time with this woman's family, basically, her and her son. And they're spending time together, and there's clearly something growing. And he makes this decision to sort of let down his walls a little bit. And he's like, he asks her if she wants to see something. And she's like, totally game. And so they go on this drive through LA, and they drive into a ravine, and they spend all these they do all this little montage of things together. There's things that he presumably likes to do alone. And so he's sort of like welcoming her into his world a little bit. Probably trying to show off a little bit, but just, you know, it's just this beautiful, intimate thing. And it's shared like a music video. There's this great song playing, and it tells you so much about the characters in 2 minutes. You get an entire love affair in 2 minutes. It's fucking fantastic. And that's always stuck out to me as one of my favorite sequences in film. Which is funny because I'm usually a person who really loves dialogue. Like I really gravitate towards dialogue heavy stuff. I tend to make dialogue heavy stuff. Like it's something that I really like. So it's weird for me that I would pick something that is basically like the opposite of that. But that's also a challenge for me if I'm making things, is to try to think more like that, because it is so tremendous. It's such a tremendous delivery system for character building and for feeling, and it's something that you shouldn't ignore when you're trying to make something. So that's always stuck out to me as like one of my favorites.
Absolutely, that's the power of cinema.
Absolutely. But cinema is so many things, but like that's something that I should never forget while I'm making stuff, but also while I'm watching stuff. It's easy to just get pulled into stuff like that. That's one of my favorites for sure.
It's a good one. Is that my turn?
It's your turn, Alex.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with a film that as soon as I say the name of the film, I think everyone in the room is gonna know the scene.
Oh,
yeah. So this is a film that I think just the whole film is probably one of my favorite films. Just because it's kind of like it's a Western film. However, it's shot, the way it's shot and edited, and the music and everything that drives the film is horror. It's like it's very interesting. It's just a very interesting combination. So the name of the film is There Will Be Blood.
Oh,
yeah. And now everyone already knows the scene where Daniel Day-Lewis walks all the way across the room and drinks Paul Dano's milkshake, basically. So I think that is one of the most memorable scenes, not even specifically for cinematography, which is interesting because this film is one of the most beautifully shot films, I think, available today. But just because of, again, it's the build-up from the whole film between these two characters. And this is the climax of that. This is like how each of their different paths have led to this point, and what Daniel Day-Lewis, just his performance, and Paul Dano's a phenomenal actor, but just the way he delivers it is just so Looney Tune. But then at the same time, perfect. And I feel like it really does kind of, it's just you don't expect it. Like you don't expect this huge long dialogue in a bowling. I think it's a bowling alley.
Yeah, it's a bowling alley for sure.
You don't see it coming.
Kills him with a bowling pin.
Yeah, not
a bowling alley in his house.
Yeah, and you don't
he
see
beats him to death with a bowling pin.
You know, yes,
it's crazy.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert for this movie.
But indeed, so after the big long speech, Daniel Day-Lewis beats Paul Dano to death with a bowling pin. But Paul Dano doesn't have a good fate in most of the films he's in.
That's true. That's another, that scene is another one of those, another scene where the conversation surrounding something like that kind of overtakes what it actually was. Like, and there's a reason it left an impact on so many viewers that we make jokes about it.
It's not even the most well-shot film in cinema. It's not like you don't remember it for the way it's shot, but you remember it for the performance, the dialogue, the shock value, just and again, the whole film is leading up to that point between those two characters, and they're such strong characters. Like they're such like strongly built and emphasized like their development throughout the film is perfect. Their just the everything that surrounds them in the atmosphere into what made them who they are is so apparent, and it's so on their sleeve. And at that moment, it's just like that just you felt it was coming, you knew it was coming, but you didn't expect it to happen that specific way. It's just such a good. It's a really phenomenal scene, and I
Great
think
film.
yeah.
I drink your milkshake.
I walk all the way across the room, and I drink your milkshake.
And the best part is it gave everybody drinking milkshakes an opportunity to make a joke for the rest of their life. You know,
I think that
steal your friend's milkshake.
I think that scene will stand the test of time for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess one scene that's really impactful to me is from the film Hurly Burly, directed by Tony Drazen, with Sean Penn and Robin Wright. There's a scene where they're driving, Sean Penn and Robin Wright, and just to give some context, she's sort of dating Sean Penn's character, and Sean Penn in the film, his roommate is Kevin Spacey, and she's kind of dating that character as well. He's like, hey, like, what do you want to go out to eat? Like, what kind of food do you want? Do you want like French, or do you want to go to this other place? Do you want to go to Japanese, like have Japanese food? And I might be messing that up actually, but it's something like that. It's two different styles of cuisine. She's like, I'm not sure. I don't care either way. He's like, well, which one is it? They're very different kinds of food. He's like, do you want to go to the French place or do you want to go to the Japanese place? She's like, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, like, and clearly the scene is about something else. It's about his frustration about her indecision of whether she wants to choose him or choose his friend to be with. And then he just basically flips out. And I just think the performance is so outstanding, and I've only seen that movie once, honestly, but it just stuck with me. The performance in that scene was so impactful, and the subtext of what was going on was so apparent. And I think to me that is really interesting filmmaking, is when, you know, there's absolute subtext embedded in the scene. Where
I still have to see that film. I haven't seen it.
yeah, it's a good movie.
I'll definitely watch that.
So that's a scene that really stuck with me.
I have another one.
Go for it.
It's your last one, Greg.
My last
Choose
one.
wisely.
This is number 3 all-time scenes. So this is another one that's been in my mind recently, so it made sense for me to talk about it because I have been thinking about this film recently. So this is an early mumblecore film starring Mark Duplass and Greta Gerwig. It's one of the only
Was it
films.
Kissing on the Mouth?
No, it's one of the. I think they did 3 together.
Hannah Takes the Stairs?
They did Hannah Takes the Stairs. It's this one.
Joe Swanberg directed.
Yeah. I think they did 3 films together. Anyway, Hannah Takes the Stairs is the film. Mumblecore is extremely hit or miss filmmaking. I happen to really enjoy mumblecore films, but it's definitely like, even for a fan, I think even a fan can admit, like, more than half the time
I
it's
agree. I'm in the same
almost
boat.
unwatchable. But I mean, really.
Yeah.
But Hannah Takes the Stairs is what everybody who ever tries to make one of these films is aiming for. It's just masterfully crafted and beautifully performed, and just a really elegant film. And Hannah Takes the Stairs has this moment. It's a big breakup scene. It's like, I use that in quotes, the big breakup scene, right? Like a lot of movies have the big breakup scene. I just watched one last night. Marriage Story has a big breakup scene, sort of, so to speak. There are a lot of these films, a lot of films have them. And they are often very effective, very, very, powerful to watch, very moving. Why I like this scene in Hannah Takes the Stairs so much is that it feels so real. Like a breakup where there isn't a lot of screaming and shouting. There's not a lot of, big grand statements or even tears. It's just two people realizing that it's over and trying to find the words to be like, we're out. Like she sort of starts the conversation and she's kind of dancing around it, and you can tell instantly that he knows what's happening. because he kind of stiffens up, and eventually he's like, well, I'm breaking up with you because you can't do it yourself. And it just feels so real. The conversation feels so real and unsatisfying. And I think that's what a lot of films get wrong in breakup scenes is there seems like there's finality at the end. And again, that can always work. It can always be very powerful to watch. But what makes this one so compelling to me is that at the end, you just feel like there's still this feeling hanging over these people. Like it's just very unsatisfying. And I think breakups are unsatisfying. Like there's really no point except for way down the line when you realize you're not in love with that person anymore or something where you're like, oh, okay, this is over. Like it doesn't happen in one conversation, especially that conversation. That conversation is usually heavy and full of, unfinished business. And I think this film just totally nails it. And I've always had that in my head as like a gold standard for that type of scene. So that's my pick.
Yeah,
number 3.
That's a good pick. And I know for a fact that film was heavily improvised. So I wonder. Yeah. I would love to know what their process was, or if they just had kind of that in an outline, or if that scene was a little bit more written.
Yeah,
it makes me curious.
I'm always curious about that too with mumblecore, because there's often times where you're watching it and you're like, well, this is clearly written. I mean, like, and then there's other times where the lines are really blurred. And that's what you're going for. And that scene is perfect that way.
It's yet another movie I have yet to see. So this is great. I'm getting like a whole list of things I need to watch.
Cinematographer will almost never like a mumblecore. I'll tell you this right now, because that is usually not a focus of the film.
Right.
It's usually takes a back seat. So there will be a lot of scenes where you're only seeing like someone's nose and like part of their eye or something, and there's like dialogue happening. It would drive you crazy. But if you could get past that, and just like watch the film for like what it's designed to be, you might find yourself really drawn into.
It's funny you say that, because I think The Trouble was written initially as a mumblecore.
It was. In fact, it was.
And then
I came in. But I know
shot it completely differently than how mumblecore would be shot, probably.
Partially true. I knew that we were going to depart from mumblecore in that sort of sense, because I loved, and so even earlier on we were joking around and calling it Bronxcore, because we were like, hey, this is going to be something different than mumblecore. This is like our answer to mumblecore, because what I love about mumblecore is just the improvisational style and the kind of punk rock attitude toward the filmmaking. Like, hey, we're not gonna wait for like a studio to greenlight us. We're just gonna take a camera and make this thing happen. And I love that. Mm-hmm. But as somebody that appreciates shot compositions and cinematography, I wanted to see if we could take that kind of mumblecore attitude toward filmmaking, but still kind of make it something, actually that's shot sort of well.
Well, which is what the Duplass brothers do now. I mean, they have absolutely mastered the art form. So now they do combine a lot of their initial goals with mumblecore, but tying it into a nice little Netflix bow, right, which is what I think you were trying to do with The Trouble.
So the form has sort of evolved.
Mm-hmm, definitely,
yeah. So another scene that this is sort of maybe this is more of a sequence than a particular scene, right? Because a lot of people might acknowledge this whole sequence in Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, when the ape men discover the obelisk. When I saw that, so let me give you a little backstory to that film. I think it's a film that's only fully appreciated on the big screen.
Can I pause you for a second?
Absolutely.
It's relevant to what you just said. Have you seen it in 4K? I have it in 4K.
Yeah.
I think it's fabulous.
Really? Actually, you know what? I haven't watched it in 4K.
You should come over and watch it at my place.
Be happy to, because I was so disappointed that I bought the Stanley Kubrick like Blu-ray box set.
Yeah.
And then I found out when I was displaying it on my TV, it actually tells you the resolution. You could look up the settings. It was only 720, and you could tell it's you could tell it's not fully
you should
HD.
See it in 4K.
And I'm like, oh man,
it's pretty good, man.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
But I did see a restoration that's it was at the IFC Center.
That's the way to see it.
50-year anniversary.
To be clear, I'm not implying that my television is going to be better than the IFC Center, but I just,
but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's at least
definitely
comparable
worth
to
the
seeing
view.
in the theater, or at least, the next best thing,
Yeah.
you could say,
Yeah.
right? So I tried to watch that movie numerous times, like even in the 7th grade. I remember my teacher showing it to that in earth science, and I just was just like tuned out. I'd watch it on TV, and it didn't quite resonate with me. And then until a few years ago, then I saw it on the big screen at the IFC Center for, I think they were doing at the 50-year anniversary of it.
Yeah.
And I was blown away of just not just how that movie just holds up. It was just so far ahead of its time that it's incredible. So in the beginning of the film, there's the sequence that's called the Dawn of Man sequence, where you have it's like the precursor to the cavemen, that they're not quite evolved into Homo sapiens yet. That they're these ape men, and they discover this thing that's like an obelisk. It's just this black quartz structure that's not just a natural stone. It's a monolith. That's actually what it is. It's a monolith. So when they discover the monolith, they're just intrigued by it, and it's just so incredible. And then all of a sudden, they discover that they could use a bone as a weapon, and then that kind of changes the evolution of the species. And then there's the famous transition, which is, in my opinion and a lot of people's opinion, the greatest transition in cinema history, is where they toss the bone up in the air, and then it does a cutaway, and it's spinning around, and it does a cutaway into like man's in space, and then we're like a spacefaring race.
Spectacular.
And it's just, it's completely outstanding. And, something that even when I think about it, just kind of, it's like, wow.
Yep.
Chills.
Yeah. Chills.
Totally.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that's definitely on my
That's a good one.
my top list.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of others, but those are 3 scenes that I thought would be worth mentioning.
One of my favorite parts about that too is that it's a movie that you think about like all this other stuff that happens in that movie, and sometimes you forget that there's this whole ape story in the beginning, and when you rewatch it, it's like, oh man, I forgot all about this. Like not in a bad way, not like it's a forgettable. It's like it feels like a whole separate film almost.
It's a journey.
Right.
It's like a short film starting the film.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it's all so tightly crafted.
Yeah.
It's just
Very.
amazing.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And he used rear projection as a technique, which was like a precursor to like doing chroma key and green screen. This is like before people were doing green screen and that sort of thing. Kubrick was just a master of using rear projection to get
Was
images in the background.
Was it, I think Woody Allen who said every time he watched the film, it got better for him. Like
Yes.
first time he saw it, he hated it. Second time he saw it, he's like, okay. Third time, this is amazing. And then I guess the final time he saw it, he's like, this is a masterpiece of filmmaking.
That's how I felt. And that time seeing it at the IFC Center, it just felt like every scene that seemed a lot more esoteric to me, and just kind of, it's like, hey, well, what's that about? It's like everything connected. Everything was like, oh, I get that. I feel the impact of that. That's completely amazing.
The Pan Am spaceship. Come on, man. It's so good.
It's so good.
So good.
Yeah.
Alex, what's your number 3?
Okay, so this is actually a film I watched recently with Zef.
Yeah.
I had seen it numerous times prior, but I really wanted Zef to see it. I actually wanted you to see it as well, but I think you were busy at the time.
Did you guys watch this at the place?
Yeah.
Okay.
You were invited.
I was invited. I do remember this.
Calling you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's permanently burned into the tape.
It's
here,
a
so
film
it's
I think every aspiring director needs to watch. I think anyone who wants to be a director.
Are these all just digs at me?
No. It's going to feel that way because you should have shown up. But
It's not too late to see it.
yeah, it's not too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
It is a kind of a hard film to find.
Yeah.
Like it's not on any streaming services currently, and that's probably because his other film is making the rounds in the theaters. So
True.
So it's a Korean film called Memories of Murder. And the scene in particular, it's again, this is like this is in my top 3 films of all time. So not just film scenes. This is like one of the films that I would say inspires me to be a filmmaker in general, because it's just so well crafted. It's such a well crafted movie, and just everything in the film, from the sense of humor to how dark it can get, also to just character development in general. The scene, again, spoilers, I guess, because this is at the very end of the film, and after all the antics in the that take place prior fail to catch a serial killer, because so the film is about a serial killer, right? Who is I think it's South Korea's first documented serial killer, I believe, and I think that's what it follows. At least it's the most famous serial killer in South Korea, and the film is about how he evades the police and the failures of the police, and just everything that led up to kind of how the killer was able to get away with what he was able to get away with. So the scene in particular that is just like blew me away was at the very end, where one of the main detectives in the film, who is also one of the worst detectives, I think, in the history of detectives, has since quit his job because it was just, the whole thing just got to him too much, and he's on to like doing salesman stuff or something like that. And but he takes a detour to the spot where the film first started. So he gets out, and if you've seen the film, it starts with a body that is shoved in, I think it's a sewer pipe, some kind of piping, but it's a dead body shoved in some sort of piping. And at the end of the film, he makes his way back to where the journey started, which was the same sewer pipe. He's looking at it, and I think it's a little girl, right, that asks him, "What are you looking for?" Yeah. And so he kind of does. It's hard to explain. He does this kind of take, right, and then he looks just directly into the camera at the end of the film, just directly into it. And it sounds unimpactful, but when you really feel the scene and when you're in the moment of the scene and you understand what it means, is that basically, because at the time the killer still hadn't been caught, and so what this director wanted to do was make you feel like the killer was in the audience, and he's looking out beyond the screen, beyond the scope of the film, into the audience for the killer, because that's where, I mean, the killer is. He's watching the film, you know? And I thought that's just one of the most impactful, like, just go see it. I can't even describe it. I'm having a hard time describing this scene.
I believe it.
But it's phenomenal. It's just such really a phenomenal film.
You know? I mean, and that brings to a greater point. It's worth discussing these scenes, and it's really intriguing discussing these scenes. But I think the power of filmmaking is actually watching them in the context to the film itself, and then really feeling the whole breadth of the scene. You know,
they recently caught the killer, by the way.
Yeah.
Like
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Really?
In real life, they actually caught him, like just literally a couple months ago.
Yeah,
so
the
funny thing about it was Alex had mentioned, he was like, in the time that I told you to see this movie to the time that you actually saw this movie, and you know, this movie came out almost how many years ago? 15 years ago?
Yeah, in the 90s. Yeah.
Or like early 2000s.
Yeah, something like that.
2003.
Oh, yeah, 2003. That's it, 2003.
So like 17 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
And so in the last few months, they had just caught the killer. So I thought that was kind of crazy, just that Alex had said, hey, watch this movie, and that was like 6 months ago. Then when I finally saw the movie, in that interim of time, they'd actually caught the real killer.
The killer is no longer in the audience.
Yeah. Insane.
He's in prison now.
Yeah.
So I have no reason to see the film, is what you're saying.
No, watch the film. Watch the film.
I just readjusted my mic. Can you hear me okay still?
Absolutely.
Okay, sweet.
The next topic I want to start covering is films that we've seen in 2019 that impacted us, and then films that maybe we haven't seen that we quickly just want to mention. That those are a few films that I definitely on my list of films to see.
Okay. Would you want to start with one, or start with, how do you want to do it?
I guess start with...
we had a little conversation off the record about my list being kind of weird.
Oh, true.
So you know, all of our lists are probably a little weird. Like, but just three films that really stuck out with you. Like, stuck out to me.
It doesn't have to be like, hey, those are... It doesn't have to be like an exact science.
State officially, this is not necessarily a recommendation of like my favorite film from the year. If I discuss like something like Happy Death Day to You. Okay. It's not because I thought it was like one of the better movies. It might not even make a top 10 list for me, but I have a compelling reason for you to maybe watch it.
We'll go for it.
Okay.
It sounds like you're talking about it already.
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of did, didn't
Yeah.
I? So have you guys seen Happy Death Day?
I have not.
I don't think
Okay.
I've seen it. No.
It's basically, so that this was Happy Death Day to You is a sequel to Happy Death Day, which is basically a movie it's like reskinning Groundhog Day with a college-age girl who is going out to party one night and gets murdered. And she wakes up and she's all of a sudden stuck in a loop of getting murdered over and over
Wow.
on her birthday.
Yeah.
Okay. So
No matter what she does.
no matter what she does, she just keeps getting killed. And
Is it by the same person?
well, that's the whole movie's about.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out who the fuck is killing me.
Yeah.
It's really
Well,
interesting
it
premise.
sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it's a very cool premise. You would think based on the previews and stuff that it's a completely avoidable film, just in terms of like, oh, this looks like, you're schlocky or whatever. But it's surprisingly heartfelt, surprisingly well crafted. Like, it's just a really fun movie to watch. So Happy Death Day to You is the sequel to that. Now you'd be thinking, all right, well, this is clearly a cash grab. This is going to be a piece of trash, But I was in a mood to watch it this year, and so I checked it out. It really surprised me. It's like a surprising film because it kind of starts in a way that you think it's going to start. And I don't want to say too much because I really do recommend watching both of these films. And it just goes a whole other direction. And it's like fun. It's like fun the way it goes. And it totally surprises you. And it gets a little wonky towards the end, the way, sequels often do. But it really, really worked for me. And it was very funny. And like I said, heartfelt in ways that are very surprising. That I teared up during both movies, which is a challenge for me I am brought to tears often by art, but it really takes a lot for me to get there. Like I don't give in easy. You know what I mean?
Sure.
These two movies really got to me. I don't know what, there's some scenes that she has with other characters in her life, and they're all really surprisingly intimate and beautiful. And it's just a really cool little set of movies. And I know that the director wants to make a third, but I don't know if they're ever going to let him. But it's just unfortunate because it's a surprising film. I would definitely recommend checking. If you're going to watch Happy Death Day to You, you absolutely have to watch Happy Death Day first, though.
Well, you've convinced me. I'm going to check out both of them.
They're fun watches. They're not the kind of watch where it's like I'm recommending a 3-hour tearjerker or something. It's an hour and a half. It's fun. You pop it on. It's a really good couple of movies.
Nice.
Blumhouse Pictures.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's my first. Not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
How about you, Alex?
So this
Happy
is
Death Day.
Movies that came out in 2019.
Notable.
So
Notable films.
Notable
that you're like,
films.
wow, that came out last year, and I really enjoyed that.
Has anyone seen Joker?
I think everybody's seen Joker at this point.
Yeah, baby.
And
Is
that's
that
a
just
good
a
one.
given? Should
That's
just
a
not.
good one.
Well, that's
should just
I don't
why I
think
was-
it's just a given. I think it should be talked about because it's not on my list, although it should be. It's because it was so impactful.
To be clear, that would totally be in like my top 5
Right.
if that's what the list we were doing. But and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, it was.
Obviously, it's a
It
great.
was so good.
Yeah.
You know.
Is that your film? Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Let's get into it.
Let's
All
do it.
right.
That's what the people paid for.
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah.
Very good choice.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Why did you pick it, Alex?
I just watched it on Christmas. I rented it and ordered some Chinese food. I know the best way to see it would probably be in cinema, but I do have Dolby on my TV, like the Dolby Vision HDR color, so it looks nice. Probably not as good as in theaters, but yeah, it's a great movie. I think it's a phenomenal film. I love Joaquin Phoenix's take and the director's take on the Joker, who is from the conception of the Joker, since he has been portrayed on television, it's usually you think Mark Hamill. You think like this sarcastic, really witty, overly confident character. So to see Joaquin and what was the director's name again?
Todd Phillips.
Todd Phillips. So to see Joaquin and Todd Phillips like work together to craft this entirely different take, where he's just so pathetic. Even when he gains his confidence, there's still a semblance of who he used to be in there. There's this like kind of really beat down, pathetic, real character, and he doesn't feel like a comic book villain at all. So it was really interesting to see a character that makes sense not to have like kind of the usual trappings of an overly confident comic book villain, especially with his origins where he hasn't built up to that point yet. And it was a really, really good film. And I know it's a little bit Joaquin Phoenix, the film, for sure. But
Yeah, definitely.
which I'm completely okay with. For the record, he's one of my favorite actors.
Exactly. It's just.
Have you seen the documentary that's literally that?
Yes, I have.
It's highly.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. That's a
I'm
great
familiar with it.
documentary.
I've just never actually watched it.
It's hilarious.
Don't watch it as a documentary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more.
Because
Of
I
a,
don't think it actually is.
Yeah, it's more of
That's
a
a whole other
performance.
conversation.
It's more of a performance piece. I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a great film. I think for 2019 to have a film like that in it, I think is extremely important as well, because cinema currently is veering away from that, especially when everywhere you look, it's superhero movie after superhero movie after superhero movie.
So that's where I want to stop you. Because that's one of the most compelling things about Joker to me.
Yeah.
Is that I totally feel that way.
Yeah.
That like I am so oversaturated with superhero stuff. And of course, bunch of, 30-something filmmakers sitting in a room are going to start to like, man, I'm so tired of superhero film. Why doesn't someone finance my indie picture where I talk about fucking, the death of my grandmother or whatever. But like it's true though. It's just a bit much. It's getting to be a bit much. There's television series, there's web series, there's major motion pictures. You don't think of Joker as a superhero film, but it fucking is.
There goes our Marvel deal, guys.
Don't worry, I'm not getting a Marvel deal.
It's Taxi Driver wearing a superhero movie.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so brilliant.
Yeah.
Is that, and again, I've seen alternate. One of the movies on my list that we're probably not going to get to is Brightburn, which is another sort of alternative superhero story. And there's a reason these things are really compelling to watch, is because we are a little oversaturated. So it's natural that films like this are coming out, or Bad Boys. Have you seen this television series?
No.
Yeah, or I may have been
talking about The Boys.
Oh, The Boys.
Yeah, sorry.
The
Boys is great.
Can we cut that out?
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
The Boys, like these sort of alternate takes.
Yeah.
Joker is head and shoulders above all.
It's cool. Also, I've been following Todd Phillips' career. Shout out to my boy Zef Cota, because I was talking to him on the phone. I was like, "Hey, you know who directed Joker?" It was Todd Phillips.
Hangover,
that directed not just The Hangover in old school, but he directed a really underground. It became sort of a cult hit. This documentary when he was fresh out of NYU film school about this shock rocker named Gigi Allen, and the name of the documentary was called Hated. And it was a documentary that I saw when I was 14 years old because my friend Jeff had it. And, then it's kind of cool watching this director's career progress over the years and kind of what he's ascended to, like the kind of filmmaking that he's doing now. And it's, so that's pretty incredible.
Gigi Allen is definitely someone you don't want to put into Google image search.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Not sure what's going to pop up.
You don't
Yeah,
want, you don't
exactly.
want to.
Do not do that. Don't do it. Soil alert. Yeah. So good choice.
Very good choice.
Uncut Gems. That's in
right.
my 2019.
Now, does it count if I saw it? Oh wait, no, I did see it last
Well, it
day
came
of
out-
2019.
It
I
came
saw
out.
it.
It came out in 2019. So it's a 2019 film.
Yeah.
That blew me away, and also interesting to see how the Safdie brothers, their career is progressing. Been
Absolutely.
fans since they did Good Time.
Yep.
Greg put me onto that movie.
I did. Thanks
Yeah.
for the credit.
Yeah.
Public credit.
And I saw it. I remember seeing it on my birthday 2 years ago, and it blew me away. I saw it again in the theater, and so
If you're not familiar, if you're only familiar with the Safdie brothers, I'm just saying this in general for if you're listening to this some point in the future, and you're only familiar with the Safdie brothers via Uncut Gems, you must see Good Time.
yes,
Must see Good Time.
crucial watching.
It's a stupendous film.
Yeah,
And if you like Uncut Gems, you will absolutely love Good Time.
absolutely. And Uncut Gems, what I thought was interesting about it, without wanting to give away any spoilers since it's fresh in the theater, but I like when a film surpasses the trailer. So I thought the trailer made me want to watch the movie because, you see Adam Sandler in this really intriguing sort of role where he's not playing, just a caricature of himself. He's actually getting into this character performance. And from the first moments of the film, this is already bigger than the scope of the trailer was. This is already a lot more cinematic and interesting. And, it just, I thought it was just pure cinematic gold. And I think a career performance from Adam Sandler. I think he hasn't done a performance this strong since, probably Punch Drunk Love, honestly.
That's a really good film as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally in agreement.
So
on all that.
that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
So what else, Greg?
So let me think here. I have this big long list. I'm trying to decide what I want to talk about next. I'm torn between, I'll give you guys the choice, okay? I'm going to give you the choice between Alita, Battle Angel, and Midsommar.
Midsommar.
You want to talk about Midsommar?
No, wait, you stole one of mine.
Alita?
No, Midsommar.
Oh, no, then you talk about Midsommar. I'll talk about Alita, Battle Angel.
Okay.
There, kill
You
two
do
birds.
Alita, I'll do
Kill two birds.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is another one of these films where I guess that's going to be the theme of my picks here. It's like not what you would expect. Alita Battle Angel. It was. I saw the I didn't know anything about the anime. I didn't know anything about the movie being made. I knew nothing. I just happened to see the preview one day, and I was like, "This is really interesting looking. Like just a really weird little." It kind of drew me in. So I went and saw it in theaters. And again, just a surprising movie. It just surprisingly had some, I didn't tear up during this one, just to be clear, but it was surprisingly heartfelt. The characters were, it's really a story that is geared more towards a younger crowd, I think. But I found myself really on board with a lot of what was happening. Even some of the teenage angsty stuff didn't really bug me the way teenage angst usually bugs me in films. Like I'm watching a show or something, I'm just like, ugh, whatever. But this one really got me, and it took me along for the ride. But I think the reason I'm bringing it up on a cinema podcast would be for the underappreciated level of excellence that they achieved in CGI. Okay, like I am a hardcore like hipster douchebag when it comes to CGI. Like I whine about CGI constantly. I whine about it pretty much any opportunity I get. If I see CGI in a film, I'm almost always tuned out. Yeah. Almost always.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of CGI.
Let's use practicals, guys.
It's I don't know if it's maybe the way my brain is wired, although I play video games, so you wouldn't think. Anyway, I don't know what it is, but I see CGI and I'm just instantly like out. I'm just out. I don't feel whatever's happening on screen. Alita Battle Angel succeeds in a way that's hard to describe without actually watching the movie. It is dripping in CGI. Like there are characters who are clearly it's a guy's face has been molded onto it, but it works so well and it's so beautifully crafted. It's a must see. I think.
Was
just
the CGI better than Cats?
Oh my god! Like not even. It's not. Well, that's a great example of a film that doesn't do it. Yeah, but Alita Battle Angel is worth a view just for the sake of watching how good CGI can be done. Like it gave me hope for the future. If I'm like, okay, it's inevitable that we're headed this direction. It's only going to get worse. So if they can make movies like Alita, then I might find some films once in a while that I'm like totally connected to, even if it's CGI. They just really achieved greatness, I think, in that film with that stuff. So that would be my, yeah.
Excellent.
I definitely want to see that film.
Yeah.
I haven't
definitely
had a chance to see it yet. But
again, it's not something I put on a list, like top 10 or whatever, but if in terms of like interesting things I saw this year, that's definitely on the list.
Noteworthy film.
Yeah,
nice.
For sure.
On to, okay, so I guess I'm taking from one of the films from Gregg's list.
Well, my list, no, you're not taking. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, okay, so the film is Midsommar, and if you haven't seen it yet, you have to. It's just one of the films. Whether you love it or hate it, it's definitely a film you absolutely have to see. Yeah. Don't take your kids.
Okay. Noted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely on my list of things to watch.
This is actually, it's
came out in 2019.
From the director of Hereditary.
Yes, from the director of Hereditary. I believe he's like 30 years old, 31.
I think he's younger than that, man.
Very young guy. and he killed it with Hereditary, by the way. So that's another film for another time. But Midsummer is about a Norwegian. Is it Norway? Is it Norwegian?
I think it's vaguely
some sort of
Scandinavian.
It's not really.
Yeah, it's kind of some kind of Scandinavian.
Like I didn't
cult.
research or anything. I'm pretty sure they made it up, but I'm not entirely sure.
The lore, I think, is at least from my understanding, and I'm by no means a historian, but it's pretty accurate on like the old people needing to jump off the cliffs to lessen their burden on their families, and just the way they deal with
you totally just spoiled the picture, though.
Oh,
by the way,
spoilers.
So
no, it's not. That's not a spoiler.
Reverse
That's like,
spoiler.
Spoiler.
That
Go
happens-
back and don't listen to what you
so
just
early.
said.
Happens so early in the film.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm just
But yeah, they spent so much time on detail in that film. Like the director did such a phenomenal job, and it's one of those that it's one of those films you watch. The more you watch, the more details you pick up on, like the symbolism, the stuff in the beginning of the film that connects to the end of the film, and it's one of those films where I feel like he spent so much time on the details. Every single frame, every single thing that he decides to let you watch in the film, like what he puts on the screen,
It's purposeful.
Is so purposeful.
So purposeful.
It's so intense and so purposeful, and it creates such a nice wrapped up film by the end of it. And when you're at the end and you're like, at first you're like, well, why? And then you're like, you just get this sense of like, I understand, like why she behaves the way she does at the end, and why, how from the beginning to the end and the journey to get there, it just makes so much sense. And it feels like it wouldn't be like that ending totally feels like it wouldn't be something that you're like, well, why is she smiling after watching like all her friends get murdered and people are like wearing her friends?
Spoiler.
Yeah,
This whole thing
is just spoilers.
Yeah, you shouldn't have listened to it. No, one of my favorite things about this movie too. I'm glad you brought it up, Alex.
Yeah.
He achieved this really well with Hereditary too.
Yeah.
Where the images are so striking, and the set pieces, the environments that you're in are so striking and so memorable.
Oh, yeah.
That like it lives with you in your mind. Like
Yes.
Most films you see live with you in some way, right?
Yeah.
Like even the ones that you don't really like or whatever. But I can picture Midsummer and films that achieve this. Like I can picture it vividly in my mind.
Yeah.
Like almost I saw it, 7 months ago or whatever, and I can still picture the colors. I can picture the teepees.
It's like a watercolor
I can
painting.
picture the weird straw people. I can picture every image in this film almost like with perfect precision.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible achievement.
I saw an article.
Well said.
I saw an article where the director, I think it was either the director or his cinematographer was talking about basically what they were trying to achieve with the film is to push the film as bright as they could possibly go before like destroying the image.
Extreme.
Yeah. So they really wanted to nail, I guess, that juxtaposition of, hey, this is what.
It was Ari Aster.
What's that?
That was he because of that comment.
Ari Aster.
Oh, okay. So it was
Aster,
it was the
director.
director. Yeah, it was the director. Shout out to the director. He's a phenomenal director.
Great director.
Shout out to John with the solid, solid
Shout out
producer role
to
over
producer
there.
John DiFilippo. So actually that segues into Gregg, what you were talking about segues very well into my next film that I'm going to mention, which is a lesser known film, very impactful as far as the imagery. And I'll give a little context that I saw this film along with my producer George Rudai when we were at the Cannes Film Festival. We were actually trying to see another film that we didn't get a chance to see, and so we ended up seeing this movie from Finland that on paper, I don't know if I would see this film based off the description. It has to do with BDSM and like sort of like bondage and just like topics that like
You'd see this film. Don't give me that shit. I don't know. It's got a bunch of naked women in it or whatever. I would never. I would never.
A movie about a dominatrix, right? So, but we saw this film and it just blew us away. It's called Dogs Don't Wear Pants, and it's from Finland, and just such bold imagery, such bold storytelling, also such a good character-driven film. and really just, I know that this film didn't have a wide release, and it's a foreign film, but I can't recommend it enough. It was just, they did such a good job, really going there.
Do you know anything about its release in the States, if that's coming, or has it happened?
That's a good question. I got to look into it. I don't know anything currently
Okay.
about their distribution deal, but
No.
I hope it does actually get released in theaters over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really worth watching on the big screen.
I remember you
definitely
telling
a
me about
cinematic
that.
experience. No plans yet, so
Okay.
yeah,
Hmm.
I'll find out. Once I hear, we'll give an update.
Well, not all of us can go to Cannes.
I'd like to thank you in advance for the tickets.
Yeah.
Eventually, we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get
Yeah,
we'll get there. Cool.
and maybe I don't know if you guys want to talk about a third film. What I'll do is maybe just for the sake of time, I'm just going to mention a couple of other films that I saw in 2019 without going into detail about them, and then I'll mention a few films that I didn't get a chance to see in 2019
Mhm.
that I would like to see. So a few other films that I saw that are certainly noteworthy in 2019 are certainly The Peanut Butter Falcon. That was with Shia LaBeouf and Dakota Johnson and a guy named Zachary. I don't remember his last name, but he was actually a guy that plays a character with Down syndrome. And actually, they got an actor with Down syndrome, which I thought was
Oh, wow.
really,
It's kind of
really,
cool.
really cool. That
Yeah.
they pulled it off really well. Great character-driven.
I'm glad it wasn't Sean Penn playing someone with Down syndrome.
Zachary Gottsagen. I hope I'm not butchering his name, but he did a tremendous job. And The Irishman, Scorsese's film, The Irishman, that was definitely
I still
a
have to see
great
it.
film of 2019 that, long anticipated, and he really delivered on that one. And of course, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, awesome
Yeah.
film, Tarantino.
Probably my number one for the year. Personally.
Yeah, great film. So, and then a few other films that are on my list of, top films to see that came out in 2019 that I think all of them, if I'm not mistaken, premiered at Cannes. The Lighthouse, Parasite certainly won the Palme d'Or at
That's the
Cannes.
one you
Same
haven't
director.
seen that you'd like to
That,
see?
yeah, that haven't seen that are absolutely on my
That's-
list. of
that's on
films
my
to
list.
see.
By the
Yeah,
way, Parasite is
Parasite.
the same director that did Memories of Murder.
same
Yeah.
director.
Yeah, phenomenal director.
And Midsommar.
Yeah.
Definitely want to see Midsommar as well.
Yeah, you have to
and-
see it.
But definitely to Parasite at the top of that list.
Mhm.
Parasite's up there for
Yeah.
me too.
Yep.
And actually Lighthouse. I haven't seen that one either.
How about you, Greg?
so-
any films that you've seen in other films that you've seen in 2019 that are noteworthy that you want to just rattle off real
Sure.
quick, and ones that you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one none of us have mentioned that was probably one of the biggest films of the year is Us. If you haven't seen it,
I
see
haven't
it.
seen
It's
it,
a-
but I definitely want
flick.
to see it. That's also on my list.
Us is up there. You could talk about that for a while. Knives Out, I saw.
Oh, that's also
Which
on my list of
was-
films to watch.
Excellent. And then, you know what? I'm going to give a little shout out to a film called Glass, which was right in the beginning of the year. It came out. It's probably been forgotten by now, which is unfortunate. But Glass, to me, I'm just say a couple things on it. I think is so I loved Unbreakable. I was okay with Split. And when Glass, the concept for Glass was sort of becoming public, the idea of tying these films together and making it a trilogy, almost like retconning it, like going backwards. It was never the intention necessarily, but we're going to try to tie these things together. I thought it sounded ridiculous. And I'm a guy I give Shyamalan a lot of leeway. I just really love his films, and I think he gets a bum rap, and I think it's unfair sometimes. So I was really going in with the mindset, like, even for me, this seems like a lot. Like, what is this guy trying to do here? And it kind of blew me away. I was surprised at how well it worked, especially when you consider that it wasn't ever really designed to be that way. At least it didn't seem that way. And
Well, you've convinced me. I got to check it out.
yeah, it's just a really fun film, and it ties the story together. It really worked, and the fighting scenes are fun. It's just a fun little flick.
Nice.
Yeah, that'd be on my list.
How about you, Alex? Any other films that you saw?
Not on my top 10. Just saying, I enjoyed it. It's notable
I hear you.
film.
It doesn't have to be. It's notable.
Notable.
I'm trying so desperately to find a film that I watched in 2019.
Don't worry. Listen, is there films at least that you would want to watch that are on? I'm sure Parasite is on.
Parasite is definitely on the top of that list. I think.
I'm sure you saw one of those. Did you see Ad Astra?
Short list. I'm trying so hard to.
Oh, Ad Astra is also on my
Yeah,
list of films to watch. I'm a big fan of.
It's on my notable list.
Big fan of the director James Gregg. Also
Yeah.
a director who I've been following his career since pretty much the early days of his career.
He's awesome.
So yeah, I think as far as 2019 films go, it's just the two. There are definitely a lot that I want to see. Lighthouse being one of them. Parasite, the usual people, I guess, probably their top 10 of 2019 that I haven't had a chance to see yet. One that I do really want to see that I haven't had a chance to see that I don't think anyone's mentioned is Dr. Sleep, which is the sequel to Kubrick's The Shining. And it's a direct sequel. And I've heard it is phenomenal. And it somehow it seems to have gone way, way under the radar. Literally no one
I'm
talks
familiar
about
with
it.
I know it's with Ewan McGregor.
Ewan
I
McGregor,
definitely,
yeah.
want to see that one.
Yep.
Sure.
There were a couple of films like that this year that I was looking at this long list of like in preparation. I was like, oh my God, I completely forgot about that movie. And that just came out and I completely forgot about it. I was like, man.
Everyone has. It's like a blank. Everyone just blanks on it for some reason. But
That's true, because
the
I'm
people who have
familiar
seen
with
it,
it, but it
Mhm.
wasn't. I think because The Shining, as in particular, as a film, it's such a great film. But there was that whole controversy where Stephen King sort of
He hated
disavowed it, and
Yeah.
then they made a later version that was more truer to the Stephen King adaptation. So there's that whole convoluted thing that happened that That,
I've heard.
I've never understood that.
I think for me,
like-
that was the whole thing that kind of maybe like that's why Dr. Sleep sort of went under the radar for me.
I've heard
if you're a writer, like, and you have a major novel that gets sold, like, I've never understood not understanding. Never
I'm
understood
with
not
you, Greg.
understanding
You're giving
that
up
it's
your
going to
baby.
change. You're giving it up.
You're giving up
It's-
your baby.
A film cannot possibly encapsulate a novel. It can't be done.
It can't be done.
Unless
It's
you want to
ego.
make like a 7-hour, epic or something.
If you
It's
sell the
ego.
rights, if you option the rights, you sell the rights for somebody else to adapt your work. I don't think you have the right to complain.
I don't think you do either, especially when you make as much money as Stephen King does. Like,
Agreed.
But it's,
Yeah.
it's like Stephen King and Kubrick, who are two people who
Masters.
have huge egos.
huge.
So
Absolutely.
each one of them is probably thinking, "Well, I did the better job
I'm
on
the,
the
I'm the master.
So it's probably
that's just it. Like Kubrick couldn't write the novel,
Who-
and
it comes down
King
to who's the
can't
smartest
direct.
person
Have
in
you
the
ever
room.
seen a King directed thing?
Yeah.
They're terrible, and it's like that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Like, so chill with that.
Yeah, I'm
You
with
know?
you.
Yeah,
But I have heard that it merges seamlessly Stephen King's idea of what the series should be and Kubrick's idea of what the series should
Interesting.
be. So,
It definitely,
the director does a
I'm
phenomenal job.
convinced. I have
Yeah.
to watch it.
Didn't his son direct something this year? And I completely forgot
Yes,
about that too.
yes, it's a show. It's a TV show.
Yeah.
And it's actually not
a
terrible.
horror TV show. What was it?
Yeah, it's a
called?
horror TV show. I forget the name. It's about like this psychic girl who can pull up a
Yeah.
bridge that takes her places
Okay.
or something. But it's actually pretty good.
I
It's
completely
actually-
forgot about that one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was a TV series.
So is there any other?
We got
Is there
John over
any
here.
other films that people want to mention for 2019?
So this is a cinema podcast. Are we avoiding television entirely? And I'm okay with that.
Okay, I'm gonna take a second. I'm just gonna take a second. to
Listen,
say
if there's a show,
I have a
that you wanna-
cinematic show.
If there's a cinematic show that you want to talk about, I think it's
I don't even
on
want
the
to talk
table.
about it. Just like a notable thing I watched this year.
Mention it.
Watchmen.
All
Watch,
right.
watch
Yeah.
Watchmen. If you like Lindelof, you're gonna like the
I
show.
definitely want to watch the show.
Yeah.
I think I'll
Oh,
pass.
that's coming up.
1917.
Yeah.
That's also on my
Oh,
list.
Oh,
I
yeah,
can't believe
1917.
none of us
This
leaves
leaves
this
that
to the
list.
bunker.
Did you say you saw it, John?
All right. And the bunker list, the best way to describe it is if there was, let's say, some sort of apocalypse was going to happen. Let's say it's like a nuclear holocaust, whatever, and you were going to go into an underground bunker where somehow you could watch movies, right? But you could only pick 50 films from the last 50 years. Now, the rule is you could only pick one film for each year. So, for example, in 2019, you can't pick Uncut Gems and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You'd have to pick one of the two. Same thing for each subsequent year for 2018, and that sort of thing. What would be the films? Now, we're not going to hatch those out now because that would be a whole other episode, and but that's a concept that I want to bring up to future filmmakers that appear on the show is what is their bunker list? you know, and I think that'll be
Future filmmakers, except for Alex and I.
no, you guys can make a bunker
I'm
list.
just kidding.
Yeah. Of course, you guys can make a bunker
Well,
list.
we could put it in the show notes.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea.
There you go.
You know,
Yeah.
put our bunker list on the show notes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I would love to see Martin Scorsese's bunker list.
Oh man,
That's a
too.
bunker list I want to see.
definitely.
You know, so I thank you guys. Appreciate
That's
you.
it.
That's it for this episode.
Thanks for
And-
having us.
Yeah, thank you
This
for
was
having
fun.
us. Yeah, this
And-
is a great first episode, I think.
And shout out to our producer, John DiFilippo. Shout out to John DiFilippo.
John DiFilippo, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So extra special shout out to Yuri Ryback, who created the cool music on the intro and the outro for this podcast. Yuri is the composer for The Smiler, written and directed by Gregg Blake, who was a guest on the show today, along with Alex Gray, who DP'd on The Smiler. It's a horror film produced by myself, along with Christina Maldonado, starring Paige Howard, Tim Abu Nasser, and Eva Visco. Look out for it later this year on the festival circuit. We'll also be expanding it and developing this story into a feature. Greg already wrote the feature script, which is pretty fantastic. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks for listening to FilmSEEN, a podcast about filmmaking and cinema with your host Zef Cota, sponsored by Alphabet City Films, executive producer Jeff Cutler, produced by Jonathan DiFilippo, original score by Yuri Ryback.